Hello, my name is Greta Harrison. Welcome to Born Fabulous Podcast, Season 3, Episode 17. The theme of this season is young adults with intellectual disabilities living full lives of independence and interdependence. After 16 episodes featuring 3 self-advocates, now you will hear an in-depth series about marriage, featuring parents, self-advocates with support staff, and an employer. This is the first of 8 episodes with June and Jim Zoul and Melody and Bob Ruppel. Both couples are retired and have been married over 40 years. They are the parents of James and Kristen Rupple, who have been married over 5 years. James and Kristen have Down syndrome. This episode won't have any music at the beginning or end because of its length and the unusual beginning. Before I start an interview, I always press record to get casual chit-chat that may become relevant. After this introduction, you will hear a casual conversation where the Ruppels were discussing their former careers. Bob had just finished telling me his story, and then he segued to Melody. Here is her story.
And Melody had a thriving career until Kristen was born, and the other 3 came along, the other 2.
So I took a break, and then I went back to work and managing some government contracts that addressed actually full inclusion for special needs children in a regular classroom. So although I did the financial part of it, it was a very rewarding job.
That is great. See, I'm glad I asked that question. So the government, okay, if you could tell me just a little bit more about that.
Have you heard of the company WestEd?
I have not.
They're pretty well known in education throughout all the states. But they manage grants that address needs of kids from birth through college. And my boss believed in full inclusion for our children and really spent her career working towards that. So they trained teachers how to work with kids with special needs, but not just that, the whole emotional, behavioral, element. And so it has gone into kids with autism, kids with, any kind of we all learn differently. And so it addresses that, and it trains the teachers how to work with those kids, giving them more confidence in their teaching skills. And it's a great program.
And it's still around?
Oh, yeah. If you look up WestEd, you will you'll get all kinds of information.
Okay. Well, that's great. Well, when I get to the part where I'm asking about when they're little and their school years, you can certainly mention what you just said, because I'm sure that helped you making the choices.
I didn't do that till after I went back to work. I took a break in between having 3 little kids and a teenager at home. And so when I went back to work, I went to work for this company, but I met my boss at the bus stop. And after, when Kristen was riding the bus, and from there, she had me talk at her junior college classes, and she always offered me a job like every year for 5 years. And then one year when I had one too many expenses, I said yes.
So how old was Kristen when you started working for them? Just estimated.
I think she's about 14.
Okay. So when she was little, when she was like 8 or 9, you met this lady at the bus stop, and
yeah.
You need to work that story into what we talk about,
okay.
Because I think that's great, because it does show about connections and and the knowledge and the knowledge that we have to accumulate as parents to have our kids included, how that's valuable. And she knew that, and she tapped into that. So you definitely need to mention that.
Okay.
And it's generational because now our oldest daughter, Nicole, is working for that company too, along with her best. And
That's
she's a
great.
teacher as well.
And she's a teacher, so she's actually a trainer.
That's great. And now, episode 17 officially begins. Hello, everybody. I am very, very happy to be able to introduce you to two wonderful set of parents. They each have a young adult with Down syndrome and who are married to each other. And they make that work. And they're going to share with us some of the secrets of their journey and how this is all played out. So I want to introduce you to Jim and June Zoul, Melody and Bob Ruppel. So hello, everybody. Thank you for being with us today.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So I want to start out with talking about the journeys of your beautiful, beautiful young adults, who I'm so grateful that you're willing to share their journeys with us. If you could talk about their birth story, it doesn't matter to me which one of you starts first, whoever wants to start first.
Well, I'll go ahead. James, when James was born, we didn't have any idea that he had Down syndrome before he was born, but immediately when he was delivered, the doctor suspected, and I knew something was kind of different because after James was born, they started to wheel me in with other moms that were recovering, and the doctor said, "Oh no, let's put her in this private room." And the minute they did that, I kind of had a feeling that something wasn't quite right. And sure enough, the doctor came in immediately and told us that his suspicion was that James had Down syndrome. We have an older daughter, 10 years older than James. We tried for 10 years to have a baby and lost 3. James's birth was my final try. So when James was delivered, I was thrilled to have a baby. I didn't care about any of the news that he was suspected he had Down syndrome. I was elated. At that moment, there wasn't anything that could have made me feel any different. So the people around me were my mother, my sisters, everyone else took it much harder than me. Again, because I think we had tried so hard to just have a baby that I was thrilled. So James's health at birth was really quite good. He had jaundice. He had dysplasia, his hips. Stayed in the hospital for a few days because of jaundice. But his heart was good. Those were really the only 2 health issues at his birth. I remember the week that he stayed at the hospital, 5 days. They wanted to give him a bottle. He wasn't sucking from my breast, and I had read to not do that because once he started sucking from a bottle, it was so much easier. So I remember going to the hospital every 3 hours to try to get him to nurse for a few days. And ultimately what I did was get a wash rag in ice cold water and have him at my breast and touch the wash rag to his face. And it startled him enough to go, and he would suck. So I went out, I told the nurses no bottles, and James actually breastfed for the first year and went right to a cup. So his birth was good. His health was good. Yeah, that was about it for his birth story. Came home and we started with all the stuff that you do.
Before I get into all that stuff that you do, I want to ask Jim. Sometimes it's different for the father and the mother, how that birth story starts. So how was that for you when this happened?
Well, for me, it was very interesting to have somebody come out almost immediately, a doctor come out and tell you, this diagnosis of your baby. And like June said, we were just so thrilled to finally have had a little baby that that really prioritized the situation more than anything else. Whatever the facts were, we would deal with whatever we had to deal with, and it wasn't going to get us down. And that's pretty much, the way we have lived James's entire life. He's more than anything, he was a blessing. So
Okay.
we were very happy to have him and still are. So
And he is how old now?
James was he'll be 39 in October.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
We will get into the other stuff after they're born, after we hear the Rupple story. So Melody and Bob.
So Kristen was a quick birth. I seem to have my kids pretty fast, and so the doctor barely made it into the room. He literally didn't have time to put his jacket on, or he had his shirt and his tie, and he ran in, and she was just delivered. Yeah, the nurses thought they were going to have to deliver her. And so no one said anything right away. We met her, and then they took her in to get her cleaned up. And we had been at the hospital about 3 hours, and Bob went home to take a shower. And it was really the nurses that suspected it and contacted the doctor. And it was a pediatrician that was on call. And so he came in and told me, and I can't say my reaction was as good as June's. I mean, I was pretty, I was 32. I never, you worry about, oh, my kid could be blind or deaf, but I'm not 35. So, we're pretty shocked. And so I had to call Bob at home to tell him. And then he came back from the hospital. But she was very healthy. She didn't have any health problems. She had a good APGAR score. She breastfed. In fact, she was very stubborn about that and would never take a bottle. But I really think for me, it took a full year to adjust to the idea, and that you just are going on a different journey, and a different picture than you had for that child. And my daughter Nicole was 12 then, and one day she says to me, "Mom, you think you're the only person that ever had a baby with Down syndrome?" You basically get it together here. And so I think part of the struggle was that I already had Nicole when we got married, and that for Bob not to have that birth experience, the exciting birth experience was difficult for me. Yeah. Bob, on the other hand, adjusted much more quickly.
Bob, you want to tell us how this was for you?
Sure. So, well, there's a few stories I probably shouldn't say on the camera, but I was in the room when Kristen was born, and as Melody said, the nurses were pretty frantic that they thought they were going to have to deliver it, and it was absolutely as Melody described. He came running in, ripping off his tie, and boom, caught Kristen just in time coming out. But for me, first of all, I was just ecstatic. Of course, this was my first, and I didn't know anything about babies, and I didn't, I was just a dumb guy that, got married and was going to find himself to be a father. But when Kristen was born, I immediately sensed something wasn't right. But having no experience about anything, I had no idea what it might be. And I thought it was, what do I know? I've never seen a newborn baby, immediately after birth before. So I didn't really give it much thought at all. I mean, it just moved on. But I remember having that sense that she doesn't look quite right. But then I just, like I said, just put it out of my mind, went on and went home, as Melody said, thinking we had a healthy, baby girl. And then I got the phone call, which, was pretty devastating. But as Melody said, I just kind of moved past that really quick too. And I just said, okay, we don't have the daughter we thought we were going to have, but we have this daughter. And we started that journey together. And it's been incredibly difficult and incredibly rewarding. And here we are.
More rewarding than words can ever say, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that both James and Kristen were beautiful babies.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Yeah. Those years, I always, when I talk to a young mom, I'm like, don't worry so much. Just enjoy this time right now. Just enjoy it.
Yeah.
I wished I'd enjoyed it a little bit more. Even though I think I know I enjoyed it, I wished I'd enjoyed it more.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So thank you for sharing that. Now, let's talk about the early years when they're toddlers and before they're in school. How did that go? Did you have early intervention? If so, when did that start? What did that look like for you? When did they start preschool? If they went to preschool, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Well, Kristen, really by 3 months, maybe even a little bit earlier, we had contacted regional center, and we had like a physical therapist coming to our house and, giving me exercises and things to help her turn and get stronger and all that. And then I think when she was, I feel like maybe about a year, she started at the ARC in a preschool program, or like a baby program, really, with other kids with disabilities. And really, some of those people are still my friends today. I mean, the girls all grew up together, and I still see those parents all the time. So she went there at the ARC till she was about 2.5 years old, and she could, by then she didn't walk till she was 2, but she probably could have. This is Kristen, because when she decided to walk, she got up and walked into the next room. Kristen doesn't like to do anything till she's sure she can be perfect at it. And so she learned to play with kids. She could recognize her name. She could recognize all the names of all the kids in the classroom. She has a really good memory. And then when she was 2.5, she was ready to transition out of that program. And, so they send, psychologists to test your kids, which, is just such an arbitrary system of someone walking into a room that doesn't know your child and expect your child to perform. And so when the psychologist got to an IQ of 70, she quit testing her. Now, I'm not saying that Kristen has a normal IQ, but as a baby, she was really a pretty together little kid. And so the director came to me and she said she just quit testing her because she hadn't had someone test that high. You've got to make her test her again. So they came back in and they gave her the test of what they would give deaf children. And she tested in a normal range. So Regional Center at that point had absolutely no program for her. So they actually paid for her to go to a regular preschool 3 days a week.
Wow.
Now, once she was done with that, they did have better programs to offer, but she actually transitioned into a regular preschool that was happy to take her, and she was there till she was 5 years old.
Nice.
Now, did you know before this happened that you were going to want to go on an inclusive journey? Did you know that at that time?
No.
You didn't know.
I mean, our
Okay.
doctor told us that Kristen might not walk or talk.
We'd have to feed her.
So we had no idea what to expect. The full inclusion journey comes a little farther down the road once she got into public school.
But really, it started then.
Well,
because she went to a regular preschool.
Yeah.
But I see what you're saying. Your mindset started further down, but you were already led to it when it came to preschool, which is great because in 2023, which is when we're doing this interview, there are thousands and thousands and thousands of parents fighting to have their child included in preschool to this day.
To this day.
Yeah. To this day. Now, my daughter was included, but, we're exceptions. We're all exceptions. So I think it's important to state. And how old is Kristen right now?
She's 38.
Okay, so we have a 38 and a 39-year-old young adult. Well, I don't know. When do we stop saying young adult? At 40? I don't know. I don't know. We have a 38 or a 39-year-old young adult who were included. Why can't we do that in 2023? This is crazy. So, all right. So that's interesting. But before I go back to June and Jim, Melody and Bob, you told me that she walked at 2. Were her other milestones pretty similar to what her milestone should have been when she was a baby and developing?
Well, I'm sure she was a little late on everything, but Kristen really has a really good memory. And so that served her well. She, in that art class, she had memorized all the kids' name tags. That was our way of teaching names. And she would actually pick them up and take them to all the kids. And the teachers were like, oh, she learned to sign before she spoke. And by this time I was pregnant with Lisa too. And so, life was busy. But she was, I wouldn't say she was right on target, but she was doing well.
She was pretty close. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how old was she when she started to speak, do you think?
Oh gosh, maybe 18 months.
Okay.
But we learned pretty early from what the doctor told us was likely to happen, which was not at all what happened. And from those testing experiences, to listen to the professionals and then just forget about what they said. And our attitude was Kristen will do what Kristen is going to do. And we're not setting any boundaries for what she can achieve. She will set her own boundaries, and that every kid is different.
Yeah.
So whatever she was going to do, she was going to do.
And I've heard many parents of adults say exactly what you just said. You cannot let what the professionals, who still seem to be outdated in many ways, in many instances, dictate your expectations. The saying that my daughter and I have is, no one ever rose to low expectations.
Yeah.
So you would think the medical professionals would know that, but they don't. So, okay, on to June and Jim. Let's hear about James's early years.
Go ahead.
I think they were very similar to Kristen somewhat, and in that James started with the regional center. For him, it was called the Early Infant STEM program in San Diego. I actually took him to a little class there with other babies early on. So we participated in the programs at the art, and the same programs I think that Melody might have been in. I don't know how we missed each other, but we did. And then when James turned 3, the school district offered a preschool program. It was not inclusive. It was a preschool for all disabled preschoolers. He participated in that from about 3 to 5 years of age. He started getting transported by the school district. One thing that I did, my first interaction with the school district, they wanted to pick James up in a little school bus and take him to his preschool class, but the bus had no seatbelts on the bus. And I remember my first time contacting the special ed director going, "What are you doing? I'm not going to put my child on a bus with no seatbelts." So they did ultimately get seatbelts on the buses for kids in our school district. But yeah, it was a great preschool experience for James, but not inclusive at all. So knowing what I know now, I wished that at that early age he would have had that experience of inclusion with regular peers. I think you can only learn, those correct social behaviors being around other kids with regular social behaviors. You can't be taught that in a book or whatever, but that's what I know that now. But let's see.
I like your quote that you can't be taught that in a book, because that's true. I always say that the benefits of inclusion in school are, and now the right word is escaping me, but they are subliminal, really. I mean, there's so many that you can't articulate that even come up later in life. And not just for my daughter, but many, I think there's a quieter sense of confidence. And it's just a natural, quieter sense of confidence, just because of her environment, just because of that. There's so many things, but I like that your quote, you can't teach that in a book.
I used that quote at so many IEP meetings because it was so important to me for him to learn all of that, to be able to live in life. You can't be segregated from that and try to be taught that. You have to live it. So I used that a lot.
That's great. So do you remember when he talked and when he walked?
He walked at 2 years of age, the same as Kristen. He never learned to crawl, interestingly enough. He was a roller. So he would roll from room to room. No matter how many times you try to teach him how to get up on all fours and crawl, he may be stubborn. I don't know. Maybe rolling was
the
easier.
dysplasia.
hip dysplasia.
Hip dysplasia.
Yeah. So he walked it too. And James has a a stutter where he gets stuck on words. It's over the years has become so much better, a lot of speech therapy, things like that. But his talking has always, in his early years, were 1 and 2 word utterances. It wasn't sentence type. So talking, we're really 1 and 2 words for, um, um, probably till elementary school for sure.
And you think he started like at age 1 or around
Yeah,
that?
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah.
So yeah, and the reason I ask these questions is younger parents, they can't get out of the habit of those milestones and targeting. But I
Mm.
remember reading a book because we were fortunate to know ahead of time. So we had that time before my daughter was born to do the research. And I remember reading one book that said, your baby is still a beautiful baby. And it
Mm.
really doesn't matter when their milestones are, they will still have those milestones. And I remember thinking that was just so wonderful. So
Yeah.
that's why I hope the young parents will enjoy this time, no matter when their milestones happen.
Yeah.
So that's great. Thank you for listening to episode 17 of Born Fabulous Podcast 3rd season. I hope you enjoyed it and want to hear more. Short video clips from most episodes are available on our YouTube channel and on bornfabulouspodcast.com. In episode 18, you will hear the Zouls and the Ruppels discuss James and Kristen's school years, advocating for full inclusion, IEP meetings, and more, mixed with some good examples and stories. Please follow and like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be honored if you would leave a review wherever you heard this podcast.